Thank you. The remote work strategy marks a significant move towards changing how we work for good. It's a framework for long-term change, and we need it, Minister. For over 100 years, we've used the same traditional model of work for office workers, version of 9 to 5:30 and office-based and location-based. For about a third of the population, it involves leaving your home early in the morning, making an increasingly long commute to an area of high employment and coming home again in the evening. If we were designing a model of how we work from scratch, we just wouldn't do it like that. Why? Well, because our settlement patterns have always evolved around access to employment. People follow jobs, and our planning, economic investment strategies and transport systems have all developed around supporting this dominant model of location-based work. So some communities thrive while others try to survive, creating a stark urban and rural divide, perpetuating regional inequality. And nor does the old model of work perform well for other communities like women or disabled people, where we have some of the lowest workforce participation rates in Europe. In general, women in Ireland, when they become mothers, still tend to be the ones taking up the majority of care, child rearing and domestic work. And the one-size-fits-all approach to work simply isn't practical, conducive or attractive to a lot of them. Add in other structural inequalities like the lack of affordable and accessible childcare, even in places like Dublin 15, where on average it's €10,000 per year, and you begin to understand why the odds are stacked against them. Let's face it, Minister, this outdated approach to work just isn't fit for purpose anymore. As we hit full employment a mere 18 months ago, we had working parents up at 5 o'clock in the morning to drop their children to family or to creches to get to work, to afford to pay rent or mortgages in commuter towns further and further away, coming home to kiss their children goodnight and rear them at the weekend. Trying to beat the crowd to get onto trains that are absolutely jammers in Coolmine or buses in Little Pace every morning, sitting in lines of cars spewing tons of carbon into the atmosphere. People taking longer hours out of their days to secure the increasingly elusive social contract a lot of our parents had, that if you work hard, you'll have a nice life. And then we as legislators tinker around the edges of a model of work that's fundamentally only suited to a limited amount of the population in an effort to rebalance workplace inequality, where people like me, with good jobs, good education and ambition, still left leaving those jobs when they have children because of the struggle to juggle everything financially, logistically and holistically. Is it any wonder that statistics pre-COVID showed us that most people would take work flexibility over a pay rise? And when COVID forced a third of us to leave our offices behind and work from home, that 6 months later, despite all the pressures that we are under and the unsuitable situation that was, that 94% of them said that they want remote working to be a feature of work for good. That mortgage applications, according to permanent TSB data, have gone up 20 to 30% outside Dublin since pre-lockdown. So I could spend my 11 minutes telling everyone how great the government is for recognising the potential of remote work when others didn't. And in fairness, it would be deserved. Investment in enterprise hubs to the tune of 180 million, supporting over 300 hubs, 3,200 spaces nationally, and the innovative work of the Western Development Commission, the Atlantic Economic Corridor, and Oireachtas na Gaeltachta, and Grow Remote. Forging ahead with a national broadband plan when others opposed it, undermined it, and just didn't seem to get how fundamental it is to our digital transformation, our regional transformation, equal opportunities and work-life balance. That connectivity through broadband and hubs is at the very heart of locationless and remote working, of building remote-ready communities. Recognising the need for our first national remote working strategy, the actions that are required to build a framework around it, the legal, tax, health and safety environment, training and skills, the national and local infrastructure required to support it, and its place in our planning strategies. But there is an urgency here that leaves no room for complacency. COVID hasn't fixed our problems of work-life balance, workplace inequalities or regional balance. It's just proven that we can do things differently. Where we go from here is entirely up to us. And I suppose my message today, Minister, is go big or go back, and nobody wants that. When people start to return to offices, equal opportunities must be the cornerstone of our new approach. And we have to do that from the start. You can be sure that if somebody feels disadvantaged by working remotely, office presenteeism will quickly return. And I'm sure you've all heard the expression that you don't get a promotion on Zoom. And nobody wants to see remote work become gendered. But it really doesn't have to be that way. A remote-first culture means that technology brings people and their work together, not the office, not one location, and not where the boss is. Whether it's 5 days a week at a hub, or if you're office-based or you're hybrid, by making an organisation location agnostic, it creates a level playing field no matter where you are. Like other significant changes in our economic and social environment, government should prepare and help organisations through a remote-first transition and best practice. We did it for Brexit. We've done it for other major social and economic changes, and we should do it for this. The carrot is always better than the stick. We need a full-scale communications campaign with case studies to show where anchor tenancies and local hubs can be secured by employers, where people work from home are using best practice in health and safety, where the forthcoming right to disconnect proposals are part of the working policy, where head offices have been swapped for regional bubble offices for co-working and team meetings, where existing building stock is repurposed for the same reason. Perhaps somebody working for a government department, for instance, doesn't have to travel to Dublin HQ, just their nearest county office, where they can work alongside other government departments. This is all part of our digital transformation of Ireland, and because of COVID, it's happening at an accelerated pace. And we need to help people through it by showing them the potential for change and best practice. At the moment, Minister, I believe there's too much emphasis on delivering 2 days a week at home and 3 days a week in the office. And that's what we're defining other people's choice as. And that's still a location-based mindset. And without changing the culture, Minister, it could reinforce rather than relieving inequality. As a government, we shouldn't define what the choice looks like. We should create a culture of choice so workers with their employers can figure out what works best for both. Remote is also only one type of flexibility. There are others: job shares, compressed hours, annualised hours, core working hours, flexi-time, just to name a few. And I believe the right to request shouldn't just extend to remote or working parents and carers, as outlined in the EU Work-Life Balance Directive. For all the reasons I said at the start, more people should have the chance to improve their quality of life. What about a young professional who could work compressed hours and then could travel for a couple of months? Or parents who want to work in the office and be based in the office, but it would suit them to come in at 10 o'clock in the morning instead. And only 40% of people working remotely at the moment are actually women. So part of the challenge for remote work is that it isn't visible yet. It needs to take its place within the overall job sector, or remote workers will continue to be invisible and we will undervalue its impact on communities. Remote work isn't coming, it's here already. According to EU Remote, there are 720,000 remote roles available in Ireland a year. Why aren't we talking more about that? How many people here know the name of the biggest remote company in the world, and that it actually employs 1,000 people in Ireland? Anybody know the name? It's GitLab. And Salesforce, of course, have just gone remote. When companies advertise roles, they are still slow to offer them as remote. There's been a 1,754% increase in roles advertised as working from home on irishjobs.ie compared to last year, but that's more of a reflection of the base that we've come from and is still called working from home instead of remote. Over New Year's, There were 3 different IDA announcements about 270 new remote jobs for Ireland, but on Twitter, all the fanfare was about the physical jobs being secured in Galway and Dublin, even though remote jobs can benefit every county in the country. We need to find a way to equally recognise and celebrate remote jobs, especially for areas that would never normally see a red ribbon moment. Have you seen a photo op from someone's home working office? No, but maybe we should start. If we are serious about remote work, and we should be, we have to be creating pathways to remote employment nationally and locally. Grow Remote are already doing it, Minister, and we already partner them, but we need to up the game nationally and to join all the dots together into a remote work ecosystem. Any government action plan for jobs should set out ambitions and measure remote jobs per local authority, because IDA research shows for every 2 jobs secured in a community, another 2 are sustained locally. That's more people being able to live and work wherever they want. That's progress in regional balance. That's change, but it won't happen organically or by accident. It has to be planned. Now's the time to be thinking about building remote-ready communities, prioritising remote infrastructure in cities, towns and villages that are aligned with Project Ireland 2040 and the National Development Plan, securing access to housing and Irish water so growth is organised and planned, prioritising mixed-purpose communities and local development plans. Mixed-purpose communities flourished because of COVID, while single-purpose communities declined. Investing in hubs and community childcare, like we invest in schools, in targeted areas, supporting sustainable transport and allowing people to work closer to home. Breaking the dominant one-size-fits-all model of travelling long distance for the majority of the day, which is so limiting, drives inequality for women primarily and poor work-life balance. Instead, make work flexibility and childcare accessible. The forthcoming Town Centre First strategy will be critical, and we need to ensure more flexibility in changing planning uses from retail to offices and to residential, making use of our vacant premises. Some people mistakenly believe remote work is all about rural Ireland, and they're wrong. Mixed-purpose communities, hyper-proximity principles of 15-minute cities are just as important in Dublin. Wouldn't it be great to see more families living in our cities like other European cities? I want to see a co-working space on every main street in every village of Dublin 15, where people do not have the real estate or space for home offices. It is entirely achievable quicker than you think. There's been a marked increase in the funding of BCPs and co-working spaces in communities all around Ireland, but we need more. We need those funds to be updated and made more available and specific to hub rollout, including Dublin, where there just isn't the same funding available. There are ways to get better value for money too. Instead of local organisations all over the country finding different suppliers to kit out co-working spaces individually, we could devise something similar to the design and build template for schools, where we have a short list of suppliers who will do it to a higher spec, getting better value for money and ensuring less variance. Currently, Minister, we have over 300 hubs around the country, but as you know, they are primarily for enterprise, not co-working, and it's difficult to make the co-working model work financially. As well as taking their place in a hub of networks like Minister Humphreys is doing, I would also suggest that the 320 employer tax relief should be made available for employees working in hubs. Long-term anchor tenancies is what they will need, and that is dependent on an accessible, affordable and professional network of hubs. Revising the tax treatment and the limited return for personal tax relief is something that I've spoken about at length and raised it when I first came into the Seanad. It's simply not enough, and it needs to play a bigger role while employers transition. Minister, I don't stand here today as a party of one or and even one of just a party. It's more than that. This is bigger than that. And you know, the people that I work with, they're fantastic and they really believe in this. People like Tracy Keogh, John Avoy, John Reardon and Karen O'Reilly. The problems are well rehearsed. We've had a year to, I suppose, experiment because of COVID and people working from home, but the problems can be overcome. So I would just ask that you would work with us on that. Thank you.